To whom shall I say hello? By Simin Daneshvar. Who is indeed left that I can say hello to? Mrs. Principal is dead, Haj Esmail is missing, my only daughter has fallen into the claws of a wolf. The cat died, coal tongs fell on the spider, and the spider died too. And now, what a snow is falling. Whenever it snows I get so depressed that I'd like to bang my head against the wall. The health insurance doctor said, whenever you're depressed, get out. He said, whenever you feel sad and there's no one you can share your sadness with, talk to yourself loudly. Meaning that you have to become your own agony aunt. He said, go to the desert and shout, swear at anybody you want to. Oh, what a snow, first it was swirling and scattering, now it's falling in tiny flakes, and the way it's falling it's obvious it will not abate so soon. It's been snowing like this since early winter. And the leftover snow was frozen on the ground, and where could people dump the snow that was on their roofs if not into back alleys? Coming and going was what the strong sportsmen, young athletes, and mindless kids whose schools had been closed would do. If it didn't snow, there would be inflation and there would be famine, and they would speak of rationing water and electricity, and if it did snow, life and schools would be closed. Last night there was a blackout at Alari I Street, and Kaukab Sultan, who was sitting under the corsi and gazing at the darkness, freaked out. Her heart pounded with anxiety, as if someone was washing clothes in her stomach. She thought she would go insane if she didn't get out of the room and out of the darkness. She got up, fumbled her way across the room and made her way out of the cold dark house, to stand outside the door. A cold wind was blowing and the neighbor's child was crying. 2 nights before, their water pipe had burst. It had been 3 days since the garbage man had collected the garbage. Kaukab Sultan, a retired employee of the Ministry of Education, didn't have much garbage to be taken away. The bursting of the water pipe had not inflicted much damage on her belongings either. Her room was on the 2nd floor, next to Mr. Panapor's room. He had at his disposal 2 large rooms, a kitchen and a lavatory. He had 3 ripe daughters and a giant of a wife. It was the neighbors that had nicknamed him Panapor too, because he sold dairy products at Jailer Street, and he did not sell to anyone on credit, not even you, though his real name was Mr. Shariatpour Yazdani. For ablutions and defecation, Kaukab Sultan would go downstairs and take water from the tap in the kitchen. She didn't have much cooking to do either, her tooth constantly irritated her gums and tongue. Her room was the size of a hand's palm, with no furniture. She had sent all her belongings to her son-in-law's house as dowry. Kaukab Sultan came out from under the corsi and stood at the window to watch the snow. The rooftops had already turned completely white, and snow had settled on the pine tree in the neighbor's garden also. The icicles hanging from the opposite roof had been there yesterday, and the day before. They had been there since the beginning of Sagittarius. How heavy was her heart! The thought of Haj Esmail had not left her head since last night. What fun we had together! Alas, it passed so quickly. He taught me how to read and write. I used to read Amir Arslan for him. We read Amir Arslan 5 times, Shamsi Karkaher 3 times, Asra's Kiss twice. Mrs. Principal had loads of books. We would take her books and return them later. Haj Esmail was the school's janitor, and I served Mrs. Principal from my own home. Poor woman had few demands. I peeled pomegranates and took them to the school at 10 o'clock, and when pomegranates weren't around, I took sherbet for her. I cooked lunch, but in the evenings she didn't have dinner, she just drank a glass of milk and went to bed. Good God, we had every pleasure that there was to be had in this town. We went so many times to theatre halls and cinemas. We saw The Thief of Baghdad, Hansa the Arab, Secrets of New York, Arshin Malalan, 4 or 5 times each. Our money was blessed. Mrs. Principal paid my wages. Haj Esmail got his salary from the ministry. It was the health insurance doctor himself who said, talk to yourself, pour out whatever makes you happy or has made you sad. Don't keep these things in your heart. We went to Karbala, we begged of Imam Hossein to have kids. God gave us Robabe. It was the year after that Haj Ismail went to work one morning but didn't come back in the evening. As simple as that, the big fellow went missing. Mrs. Principal, the security, police, all searched for Haj Ismail. I myself hugged Robabe and went from one office to another, but it was as if there never had been a Haj Ismail. He disappeared. I would put Robabe to sleep and sit on my own, smoking opium. I had made Mrs. Principal's cat addicted to opium. As soon as the smell of opium rose, she came and sat by me, closed her eyes and snored. I blew smoke at her. She twisted and turned. The cat died of natural causes. Then I made a spider addicted. It had woven a web in the corner of the room. As the smell of opium rose, it would come down and not move from near the brazier. The coal tongs fell on it. It died too. Mrs. Principal wrote an application letter, made me the janitor in her school in place of Haj Ismail and kept me in her house until she died. God bless her soul. She said, "Your work has doubled, but so much the better. You can make this long, friendless life bearable only by hard work." She was cross at my opium smoking, though. She nagged so much that I lost interest in opium. Besides, I had so much work to do that there was no time to smoke opium. In Mrs. Principal's house I did her domestic work, and at the school I cleaned the lavatories, took the girls' reports to their houses and got tips. Near New Year's Eve I planted labdanum in ceramic pots. I grew wheat sprouts in clay vases. I grew lentil sprouts and took them into Mrs. Principal's room or to the teachers' houses. I got tips from 10 to 22 mans. I did all these things so that Robabe could live in peace and comfort. I dressed her like girls from noble families, until she got her diploma. I wouldn't have made her get married had Mrs. Principal not died. But Mrs. Principal died and I became a vagrant. They made me retire after 18 years of work. They said, "Your time has come," and threw me out of Mrs. Principal's house. I was forced to ruin the girl's life, to give her to this mean bastard who works in Mr. Lacini's notary and doesn't give a damn about anybody. What can I do? The girl was pretty and dressed up like girls from noble families. She also went to the hairdressers every week. With retirement pension and in a rented room, it wasn't possible to carry on like that anymore. And she didn't pass the university entry exam. The health insurance doctor said, "Swear loudly at anybody you want to, so that your head cools off." And now my mouth's always full of curses. God only knows that I used to be a romantic. I used to like streams and trees and meadows and the moon in the sky. Nobody's taught me praying and fasting and murmuring spells. When we were in Karbala, I said my prayers while I stood behind Haj Ismail. He said them loud and I said them in my heart. I forgot them when we came back to Tehran. Instead, I know how to swear. I swear at all the unmen and the mean people of the world, to all those men who later became unmen and the nice ones who became nasty. I curse them. Many remained good, stood by their word and died. Many disappeared. God bless everyone's deceased ones. Mrs. Principal said, "Our misery is that we turn men into unmen." She said, "They suck our blood through pipe-like veins, making us bloodless and unmen." They brought Arka Reza into the gathering. Noblemen, aristocrats, and heavyweights were sitting all around. They kept saying, "Arka Reza, say, hello." He asked, "To whom shall I say hello? I might as well get up and go buy some milk to make rice pudding. No, I'll make plain pudding. But how shall I go out in this freezing weather? The new American Bella boots I have just bought are too big for my feet. My tooth irritates my mouth, my right knee is in pain. The thought of Haj Ismail hasn't left me for a moment since last night. Noises rattle in my head. But I must get out. I'll go insane if I sit on my own in this room and talk to myself. Someone is clawing at my entrails again. I'll wrap newspapers around my ankles. On top of them I'll put on those woolen socks I have woven myself, and then the boots will fit my feet. How helpful knitting is in these times, how nicely it distracts you from thoughts and fancies. I've so far knitted 10 woolen children's jumpers for Mansur and Masoud. What beautiful designs I've put in them, but he's forbidden them to accept gifts from me. Now I just keep knitting and ripping it all up. I don't have anyone to knit for, nor have I any spare money to spend. All the prices have gone up, skyrocketed. It's only human life that's cheap. That very first day I said that the only thing I had in this world was this one child. It's against God's mercy to take my child away from me, but that jackass wanted a fight from the beginning, otherwise why did he rent a house in Bari Saba to be far away from me? And then when I uttered a couple of words in all honesty, he grabbed my hand and threw me out of my daughter's house. I know what to do. I'll go learn the scandal prayers from Mrs. Panapur. I'll put my pants on top of my head, go to the roof of the lavatory and do the scandal prayers against my wretched son-in-law. I'll curse him. Mrs. Panapur knows all sorts of prayers. Didn't she, the other day on the rooftop, tell me to do the scandal prayers? On Thursday evenings they listen to Mr. Rashd's sermons. They turn up the volume of their radio so that the neighbors can also hear it. I like to hear Kamal Molek Vaziri sing. She sings like a nightingale. Mrs. Principal had a few Kamal Molek Vaziri records. I don't know who inherited them. In summertime, God bless her soul, she would go to Evin Darakeh. The school was closed too. We sprinkled water in the courtyard, watered the garden petunias we had planted ourselves, sat under the vine trellis, wound the gramophone, put on a Kamal Molek record, a Zeli record or Ekbala Sultan. I made lemon sherbet and gave it to Haj Ismail and told him, "Enjoy it, dear." She said, "You drink first." What a load would be taken off my heart if only Robabe came to pay me a brief visit and brought Mansur and Masoud with her. I told Masoud, "Masoud, you cutie pie." He said, "Cutie pie yourself." I begged him to give a kiss to his grandma. He turned his face to my lips. Scandal prayers should be said on the rooftop of lavatory, the sun should be up, afterwards Movier and Yazid should be cursed. Mrs. Panapur said this. Before winter, she had come to the rooftop and sat there cleaning green herbs. The sunshine was pleasant. I had also gone up there, to hang out the washing. My heart was so heavy that I went to her to say hello. That day we chatted and unburdened ourselves. I told her that I had had all the fun in the world and played all the tricks. Then I told her of my son-in-law and how he had made a hell out of my life. She said, "Say scandal prayers so that God will scandalize him." I don't know why she became cross with me from that day on. If we happened to run into each other, she pretended to have not seen me in all her life, so I didn't say hello to her anymore. Despite that, I'll go to her and learn scandal prayers from her. I wish it were sunny and there weren't so much snow on the lavatory's rooftop. God has shaken his torn quilt. The cotton from his huge quilt has fallen everywhere, and is still falling. May God forgive me. Oh no, I've become soft in the head. I'll never be human again. All these miseries come to you because you have uttered so much blasphemy. All I said was, "For devil's sake, you call yourself a man? You and those jackass brothers of yours have killed my poor kid." The 9-month pregnant woman has in one hand the child's lunchbox, that bastard Masoud's hand in the other. She washes the clothes of all of you, she irons, cooks lunch, cooks dinner. Your mother only plays with her rosary beads and issues orders. Your brothers act as if she is their slave. You yourself, coming back from the notary, which I pray to God you never did, are like a carcass. My poor child brings warm water and washes your feet, rubs your corns with pumice stone. I have seen it myself with these very eyes that I wish had gone blind. Whenever we went to visit them, I went there like a queen and came back like a tramp. He would browbeat me so much, her mother humiliated me and my child so much, and his brothers giggled and laughed so much that I got fed up with life. I went there seldom. One day I went to Masoud's kindergarten to see my child. I saw Robabe holding in one hand the kid's lunchbox and a shopping bag, and holding Masoud's hand in the other, a 9-month pregnant woman, slipping on the snow and walking, and Masoud nagging, "Mommy, lift me up, lift me up." I lifted the kid up instead and we went to their damn house together. The thug was lying there under the corsi, munching roasted seeds. His mother was saying her goddamn prayers in a corner of the room. His brothers had not come yet. I said, "You call yourself a man? Can't you darn well go fetch your kid from the kindergarten?" I unzipped my mouth and told him whatever damn thing I could. He was petrified with shock. He came out from under the corsi and yanked my hand and dragged me out of the room and threw me out of the door. He called me wretched demon, termagant hag, shrew witch. What names he called me! And besides, he's a brute, he beats up my daughter. I've heard it from neighbors. I've heard that he's said, "Isn't it true that your mom has brought you up by working as a servant and a janitor?" I've even heard that my daughter has given birth to Mansir without the help of a midwife. He must be 20 months old by now, he must be speaking by now. I've heard that his mother said, "What does the second birth need a midwife for?" And that she delivered the child herself. I could no longer take it when I heard all that. I got up, bought 3 kilos of tangerines and went to visit my daughter. Her face was as yellow as turmeric. What a color, what a condition. She could not even force herself to sit up in bed. She begged me not to stay there. "Mom, get up and go, and take the tangerines with you. He'll beat me up if he gets wind of the fact that you've been here, and I won't be able to get out of bed for God knows how long." Tons of dirty clothes were heaped up. I went berserk. I said, "Robabe, may your mother die for you. This is not what life's supposed to be. This is death. Your father, God bless his soul, and I had all the fun in the world. Why should you suffer and keep your mouth shut? How many lives will we be given? Your dad wrapped you up, sang you lullabies, washed you and took you out." She said, "Mom, I've got 2 kids, I can't get divorced. Besides, he doesn't treat me bad." I said, "You needn't have studied so much if you wanted to become a servant." "Oh, Robabe, whom do you think you're fooling? What other misery did you expect him to bring to you? He's also forbidden me to go to Massoud's school. I go to the butcher's, the grocer's and the dairy shop near their house so that I can see one of my child's neighbors. They must see her or hear the voice of that ribald bitch. I've heard that Robabea's become bespectacled because she studied so much. Oh, what do you know? Maybe he's hit my child on the head and that's why she's become bespectacled. Oh, the things I hear. I've heard that he's broken my child's head, that he's beaten Massoud, that the kid's ear has bled. I've heard. I utter such curses against him that if only one of them worked, he would be done forever. But that's the way it is. The bully always remains healthy. Oh, Robabe, your father and I had all the fun in the world, and I didn't deny you anything. I wanted you to be spared hard work as long as you lived in my house, knowing that you'd have to work hard when you got married, but I couldn't have known so much. His mean, cheeky sisters go to camp in Mama's house whenever they fall sick. To hell with Mama, to the devil with Mama, and who takes care of them? Robabe, of course. Robabe. Hurry up and bring fruit juice, hurry up and cook chicken stew, hurry up and buy some milk, warm it and give it to us to shove it up ours. Mrs. Principal, God bless her soul, would say, "You're raising this kid in Eiderdown, you let her have time for her lessons, you try to lift her up out of her class, but what you don't know is that women intrinsically belong to the working class." God bless your soul, woman, how wise you were. I might as well get up and go buy some milk to make rice pudding. No, I'll make plain pudding. This goddamn tooth is awfully painful. The health insurance doctor said, "Get out of the house whenever loneliness is making you freak out." She stood up and looked into the mirror. The roots of her hair had whitened, further up the hairs turned reddish and the tips were pitch black. Her son-in-law had not called her a shrew witch without reason. But he didn't know that when you sigh, white hairs protrude from your heart. When she had Robabe in her womb, the top of her heart itched during the 9th month of pregnancy. Mrs. Principal said, "The child is growing hair." She said, The child's hair sprouts from her mother's heart. She said, any way you look at it, women intrinsically belong to the working class. She lifted up the corner of the quilt. She took 1-2 from under the pileless rug. What a pity she had included those 2 Kurdish carpets and sent them to the house of such a son-in-law. She put on her praying chador and came out of the courtyard door holding her jujube red umbrella. She walked cautiously, groping at the wall, the tin drainpipe and the windows of people's houses. She wished she had had her tooth extracted, but she didn't want to appear before people toothless and with all those wrinkles. She had to walk down the whole Allery I Street, then turn round by the planning organization. There were all sorts of shops in Shahrabad Street. She could walk by the police station to Jailer Street and buy some milk from Mr. Panapor's dairy shop. There was no milk left, neither bottled milk, nor carton milk, nor ordinary milk. Oh, Tehran, may you be destroyed, may you collapse on the heads of the mean and the unmen and the castrated ones, with these hard cold winters and hot dry summers of yours. Neither a river, nor any trees, nor a stream. As Mrs. Principal said, spread like an ink stain on blotting paper, running in every direction, clawing at the surroundings like a crab. May you be destroyed, you crazy crab town. She went to the butcher's. Mr. Panapor's wife was buying meat. She had ordered a leg of mutton. Arka Jaffer was chopping the leg and breaking the bones in 2 with a cleaver. It was nicely colored non-frozen Iranian lamb meat. She said, 2 kilos and 700 grams. Well, people don't get roly-poly and grow double chins without good reason. Mrs. Panapor was wearing a woolen headscarf, she was wearing gloves, on top of her jacket and skirt she was wearing a sheepskin coat. She took a 52-man bill out of her coat pocket and handed it to Arka Jaffer. He had cut his hand, and the piece of cloth he had wrapped around it was blood-stained. She waited until Mr. Panapor left. She reached out and handed her 1-2 to Arka Jaffer. He took some tail, fat, skin and a little meat and a frozen bone from the counter, tossing them into the scales. Kaukab Sultan said, Arka Jaffer, don't give me that goddamn frozen meat from I don't know where. It's only good to be buried as fertilizer at the foot of trees. Arka Jaffer grumbled that you get what you pay for. Do you expect me to give you shishlik fillet for 1-2? He wrapped the junk in a piece of newspaper and gave it to Kaukab Sultan. Would he have dared to if Haj Ismail had been alive? What a panic overcame Kaukab Sultan. The panic was a disease in itself. She was afraid that she would remain as lonely as this all her life, that her son-in-law would never make peace with her and she would never see her daughter's face. Near the petrol station she slipped once and almost fell. The ice had turned the pavement into glass, and now the snow was covering the ice. Her other fear concerned the snow. She was afraid that the snow would keep falling for so long that she wouldn't be able to come out of her house, to go to Bari Saba and poke around in the dairy shop, the butcher's and the grocer's of her daughter's neighborhood and get some news about her. She was afraid that the snow would keep falling for so long that the doors of the houses would be buried under the snow, that the doors would not open, and that people would have to come and go through the rooftops. Her neighbors' houses had gable roofs, but her path would be so blocked that she would be imprisoned in her room, and then she would contract the disease that is said to have come from Japan. She would vomit so much that her body would be drained, and rot away all alone, without a nurse, in her room, die and rot away. Of course she wasn't scared of death. Freewheeling guys aren't scared of death, are they? She was scared of the snow and disease and loneliness and closed doors and the sulking of her son-in-law, but she wasn't scared of death, provided that she wouldn't suffer any pain, that is, provided that she wouldn't notice that she was dying, provided that she died in her sleep. Unlike Mrs. Panapor, she was no more scared of inquisitor angels, the first night in the grave and the 50,000-year-long day. She had to make herself busy with something so as to not be scared of loneliness so much. How many more times could she knit, rip it up and knit again? She thought of beginning to make a patchwork quilt, searching in her bundles, gathering whatever pieces of fabric she had, sitting down and making a patchwork quilt. But for whom? Her daughter was scared of accepting anything from her. So for whom should she make it? In the first place, what and whom was she living for? To whom should she say hello to? Who remained that you could say hello to? Heaven knew where in hell all those children had come from and poured into the alley, throwing snowballs and sliding on the ice and making slippery the passage of pedestrians. A snowball landed on her umbrella with a thud. She folded the umbrella and turned to swear. The faces of the children were red, and they were happily and joyfully sliding. She couldn't bring herself to swear. Hadn't she been a kid herself one day? Hadn't she had all the fun in the world? Hadn't she been a fireball? At the end of Allery Eye Street, the children had built a huge snowman. The snowman was a one-eyed man, and on his other eye they had tied a piece of black cloth with a black rubber band, and put a black yarmulke on his head. It was as though they were venting up their fury, for they were attacking with snowballs the snowman they had built themselves. They had struggled so hard that blood showed from under their cheeks. Their eyes sparkled. One of them was sliding on the ice, coming towards Kaukab Sultan. She was now under the drainpipe of a house, near her own. The boy kept sliding towards her, suddenly slipped, hit Kaukab Sultan, and both of them fell over, but the boy jumped to his feet and ran away. Kaukab Sultan was thrown to one side, her umbrella to another, and the meat, well, the junk meat she had bought had dropped out of her hand and was scattered on the ice and snow. Kaukab Sultan didn't believe she could be so furious. It was as though she had been abandoned in a desolate desert on ice and snow. In accordance with the orders of the health insurance doctor, she started yelling. "You sissies, you villains, you bastards. Have they closed the schools so that you give people hell? Heaven knows in what hell these bastards have hatched from their stinking eggs. Oh, folks, help me. This bastard killed me, threw me over and ran away. Must have broken an arm or leg. Someone take my arm and help me stand up. Do you only damn well know how to stick your nose up in the air, take 52 bills out of your pocket and buy 2 kilos of meat? Did you ever offer a goddamn bowl of yogurt to your neighbor? May your mother perish in sorrow, may I receive the news of your death, may you never have peace in your life, you who have separated my child from me. Robabe, where are you to see how ruined and abject has your mother become? Oh, Haj Ismail, what has become of you? I used to be full of smiles all the time, and look at me now. I wish to God no respectable person ever became abject. You God-forsaken demons of kids, you have thousands of relatives when someone utters a word to you, but where are your relatives now? A few passers-by approached her. A bearded young man with glasses bent over, took Kaukab Sultan by the arm and helped her up. He picked her prayer chadar off the ground, shook the snow from it and put it on her head. A good-looking woman gathered the junk meat, wrapped it in the newspaper and handed it to her. The young man picked up her umbrella, held it above her head, put an arm round her and said, "I'll take you home." The good-looking woman said, "If you think you've broken something, let us take you to the clinic." Kaukab Sultan's heart was beating wildly, and her mouth tasted bitter. Nevertheless she smiled at the woman. Suddenly she thought that the young man was the son-in-law she had always wished to have but never did have, that the woman was her own daughter. Then she thought that all the people of the town were her relatives and associates, and this thought momentarily lifted her spirits. She said hello to everyone and promptly burst into tears, and now she was weeping as though Haj Ismail had gone missing only yesterday.